Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at the international edition of today's The Hindu newspaper, look at the important articles relevant for your examination, take a look at the practice question and analyze the nuances of answer writing which can be followed. And at the end of the discussion, I do advise you to attempt the multiple choice questions also by visiting the Telegram channel. Having said that, all those serious aspirants who are thinking of preparation for civil services for the next year or even in year 2026, I advise you to take a look into the description section. There is a form, fill out that form and thereby ensure that your preparation is on track. Now, having said that, let us take a look at the topics that we are going to have a discussion for today. So today in total, we are going to have a discussion for 6 different topics, 3 of them slightly in greater detail for the relevance in mains, and then 3 of them for your prelims exam. So the Manipur crisis, the issue of managing diversity. Now, this is an article which has appeared in the editorial section of the newspaper. This is relevant for your GS paper 2. Now, this article basically talks about the requirement of constitutional flexibility in order to ensure that diversity and cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, ethnic diversity, everything is respected and given enough space in a particular society. That is something we are going to discuss. The shifting sands within the global supply chains. Now, the global supply chains are facing significant amount of shocks. So what are the different principles observed in global supply chains? And there have been various provisions whereby US is thinking to curb completely the electric vehicles import from China. Why is it so? So that is something we are going to understand, the security risk associated with that. So this is relevant for your GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Then paper 2, because it is also something, it has got to do with the aspect of international relations. Then celebration and vigil. This is owing to the success that India has gained in terms of eliminating diseases like trachoma as well as Kala Azar. Now, both of these are neglected tropical diseases. So what they are? So this is relevant both for your prelims, by the way, as well as for the mains exam. So, but mostly relevant in your GS paper 3. Then cyber fraud losses could amount to 0.7% of the GDP. India close to finalizing industry carbon targets ahead of Conference of Parties meet, which is going to be held in Baku, Azerbaijan next month. India cannot risk another bout of inflation. This is a statement which has been issued by the RBI governor in the wake of increased demands associated with that. Why isn't it that RBI is taking an easing of the rates? Now, other than this, you also had in the newspaper articles associated with Cyclone Dana and the development of Cyclone Dana and how millions are in the pathway of that. But we are not going to cover it in this particular session because we have done a video yesterday itself. I have released a video in our geographer series about the pathway of Cyclone Dana, about why it is getting created, how it is getting stronger, the region where it will make a landfall, the regions which are going to experience in southern India rainfall because of that, and also a kind of a multiple choice question associated with that. So all those of you who are interested to know about Cyclone Dana, please do visit that video and do take a look at that short video to gain a much deeper insight. Having said that, let us initiate the discussion from the first article of the day, which has appeared in the editorial section. Now, this is an article relevant for your GS paper 2. Now, what does the article talk about? The Manipur crisis, the issue of managing diversity. The aspect of this article and the entire gist that the author wants to indicate by this article is the fact that when we talk about Manipur, now, Manipur is facing a significant amount of turmoil, social, cultural, ethnic turmoil for significant amount of time now. And amidst all this turmoil, there is still some distance to travel before peace can be restored and normalcy can be expected. It is in this situation and this predicament where the constitution is deemed or seen as one of the solutions. How constitution can be a solution? So basically, what this article talks about is that in historical context, it brings to light that where are the other areas or which are the other instances where the slight changing in the framing of the constitutional articles that has ensured that the sentiments of the diverse population, ethnic diversity that you have, all of that is respected and peace and tranquility in a society is maintained. Our constitution has been able to do that by various different articles which are present in the constitution associated with special status and special provisions for certain states, and that too certain schedules. So here, what we are going to do, we are going to take the example, as in the case of the article, example of the states of Sikkim and Tripura, and understand that how diversity has been respected and the diverse population, the justice has been ensured. And this is something which even the Supreme Court has virtually agreed to in the various different judgments that it has passed once these issues were raised in front of the court. So, first of all, when we talk about the issue, what is the issue? That people of different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, etc., cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, now they have certain amount of preconceived notions and reservations against each other. That can happen in a pluralistic society where you have different ethnicities, different diverse population who are living. Now in that situation, one can always seek to provide some natural justice by giving provisions like decision-making power, greater representation in the legislative councils, better access or a kind of a veto power, let's suppose in terms of governance matters, as is done by the various different provisions under Article 371. So there are various different provisions which can be provided. If we take the case of Sikkim, now, once the integration of Sikkim was completed in India, after that, you had Article 371F which was inserted. Now, that Article 371F, it does consist of certain sub-provisions which are important to note. Important in the sense that indicates the flexibility in terms of accommodation of the rights of the people of different cultural backgrounds. So here, let's take the case of Article 371F and under that subsection F and G. Subsection F and G within this basically ensure that the rights are provided to people of linguistic and cultural diversities. So basically, as per subsection F, take a look at it carefully. Parliament may, for the purpose of protecting the rights and interests of the different sections of population in Sikkim, make provisions for the number of seats in the Legislative Assembly of the state of Sikkim which may be filled by candidates belonging to such sections. Meaning what? That if the parliament feels and reaches a consensus that people of different sections of population in Sikkim, they require, let's suppose, greater representation in the Legislative Assembly. Maybe the population does not have that much representation, but let's suppose that section does need some representation. Then the Parliament can provide for increasing the number of seats in the Legislative Assembly for that section of the population. So this in itself tells you the accommodative stance that Constitution provides and in fact vests in the Parliament in order to accommodate the rights and in order to accommodate the aspirations of the diverse population group in Sikkim. And subsection G, if you take a look at it, in the case of subsection G, the governor of Sikkim shall have special responsibility for peace and an equitable arrangement for ensuring social and economic advancement of different sections of the population. So here again, so governor has got the special responsibility for ensuring peace and equitable advancement of different sections of various social, cultural backgrounds. So under this, basically, the governor can always, from time to time, basically bring under his provision or under his responsibility, can issue certain clauses and make certain directives which can ensure equitable representation, or rather equitable progress. Now, as you can think, always when a particular section within a society, let's suppose the constitution, the government or the parliament in itself, they decide that this population needs to be uplifted, so let's make certain special provisions. There is always going to be a backlash from the other members of the society, other members of the community. There is going to be a backlash that what about us? Why should they be getting a special treatment? And that was the same case with Sikkim as well. And that is when you had the very famous R.C. Porial case. Now, the R.C. Porial case, which went up to the Supreme Court, the doorsteps of the highest court. Now, in the R.C. Porial case, it was about the Bhutia Lepcha community getting a kind of an undue representation in the Legislative Assembly, a greater amount of representation in the Legislative Assembly. So that was an issue which was picked up, that everybody should get equal representation. Why is it that the Bhutias and the Lepchas are getting more? That community is getting more. So that was an issue raised before the Honorable Court. Despite the fact that Article 371F subsection F tells or vests the power in the Parliament that you can create certain provisions within the to increase the number of seats within the Legislative Assembly. So what did the court say? The court basically said that the increased representation of the Bhutia Lepcha community was an inheritance of socio-political history of Sikkim, which necessitated the framing of Article 371F. So, in brief gist, inheritance of socio-political history, keeping in mind what has happened in the past, respecting the past. So that is where diverse interests can always be accommodated, right? Now, a similar case is there with Tripura as well. So in the case of Sikkim, what have you seen? That you had diverse interests, you had different groups, all of them were accommodated by special provision of the constitution. In the case of Tripura, it gets more interesting. When we talk about Tripura, now you see, you have the 6th schedule of the constitution. Now, under the 6th schedule of the constitution, what do you have? You have the provision of forming special councils, regional district councils, which will have a say in terms of the governance matters, in terms of cultural, social identity, education, etc. They would have a say. The 6th schedule was not applicable in Tripura. Now, this became applicable in Tripura after the 49th Amendment Act in 1984. So basically, when we talk about the 6th schedule. Now this 6th schedule gives special provisions for areas where you need to have some autonomy provided in order to maintain and respect the cultural linguistic diversity, etc. So that is where you basically had the power to district and regional councils. Power to district and regional councils. Okay. District and regional councils for what? In order to take decisions on matters of governance, social customs, education, usage of forest, land use pattern, etc. Now in Tripura, this was basically implemented after the 49th Amendment, Constitutional Amendment of 1984. This is something you should keep in mind. Before that, you did not have the 6th schedule which was applicable in Tripura. By the way, in Manipur, it is still, 6th schedule is still not applicable in the region of Manipur. Okay, so that is one of the other issues that Manipur is also facing. Now, as per the 6th schedule, the legislative autonomy which needs to be accorded to the regional councils, now in the case of Tripura, when it was applied to, that was different. In case of Tripura, you almost had 1/3 of the seats which were reserved for the scheduled tribes. Now, again, this became a bone of contention. The matter was raised before the Supreme Court as well. And that was the case of Subrata Acharji case. You basically had the Subrata Acharji case. Okay. Now, the issue was that you had, when the 6th schedule was applicable or applied in Tripura, it was slightly applied in a different manner as compared to in the rest of the area. In the sense that greater reservation was provided to the scheduled tribes. Now, when the Supreme Court heard the issue, the Supreme Court basically said that, look, this has been done to accommodate the aspirations which were arrived, which basically the aspirations which led to the signing of the Tripura Accord. The Tripura Accord in itself was signed in 1988. And this was signed between 3 parties: the central government, the state government, and the Tripura National Volunteers, that is the TNV. TNV, central government, and the state government. So in order to accommodate the principles agreed at the Tripura Accord, that is why a greater amount of reservation has been provided. And in order to be accommodative for that, you had sub-article 3B in article 332, which was also basically provided. So again, flexibility in the constitution and in the constitutional provisions when applied, that ensures long-lasting peace and respect to the overall regional diversity. So we have seen the case of Sikkim, we have seen the case of Tripura. In the case of Manipur, however, this 6th schedule is still not applicable. So when that 6th schedule is not applicable, then what to do? So in Manipur, you basically have again the district provisions or the district councils which are there. So in the case of Manipur, right, when we talk about the Manipur situation, so here Manipur is governed by Article 371C. 371C. That is the provision governing Manipur. Now, as per that provision, basically you have the Hill Area Committee which is created, consisting of elected representatives from such area. So here, as per this article, Hill Area Committee is formed. Committee. But you know what is very odd in this? That this Hill Area Committee does not have that much say when it comes to the educational aspects, the forest use aspects. They don't have a determining say, right? Maybe you can express your voice, but your voice isn't going to change the final decision. So means your voice doesn't count for much, right? And even when you basically talk about the establishment of district council, so in various other states like Nagaland, the district councils have got a veto power in terms of aspects of education, etc., governance, etc. In Manipur, you don't have the district councils getting veto power as well. So when we talk about the situation of Manipur and summarize it up in terms of only constitutional provisions, you will find that first of all, 6th schedule not there, isn't it? Not applicable. Means what? The special rights and autonomy which needs to be provided is still not there. Then you have Article 371C. As per Article 371C, Hill Committee but then they don't have a deciding say, no decisive power. Then district councils which are there, district councils, unlike, let's suppose, Nagaland, they don't have veto. They don't have veto. Which means what? Which basically means that their voice is diminished. This is where the constitutional provisions can come in. This is where some flexibility can come in, because Manipur as of now is heavily fractionalized in terms of where people of different ethnic backgrounds, each of them looking at each other with huge amount of suspicion. Attaining peace in this situation, in this background, is not only very difficult, but it will be very, very short-timed and short-spanned. If we want long-lasting peace, we need to resolve these issues. And how do we resolve these issues? We address the grievances. How do you address the grievances? By giving them a say, a voice, an opinion-making platform. And how do you do that? By creating provisions in the constitution by which they can represent, or they can have their representatives in whatever terms, and their say in the governance matters. That is when the people feel alienated from the governance matters, that is when they take the law and justice in their own hands, and the situation spirals out of control. So that is the role, or that is the benefit of having what we refer to as a living constitutional document. Our constitution, it is not something which is etched in stone somewhere. The constitution makers provided for the scope to create those changes, flexibility whenever required, in order to accommodate the aspirations of a pluralistic society. That pluralistic society will be at threat, will be at danger, if we do not flex the norms when required. Okay, so that is the basic gist of this particular article. Anybody having any doubt, do ask, or we shall be addressing the doubts after a couple of topics. Now the practice question. Discuss the relevance of constitutional provisions in terms of ensuring the rights of diverse cultures and identities in India. Now, the introduction for this question, or the answer, has got to be very straightforward. That when we talk about India, India is a very significantly pluralistic society containing or consisting of people of different backgrounds, different cultures, different social backdrop, and naturally people having different aspirations. As a consequence of that, so that is when you directly blend into the body. As a consequence of that, there are oftentimes various different thefts, balances, etc., and issues which conflare up. Now, this is where the constitution has to ensure, and the constitution has historically ensured, the implementation of certain special provisions to provide accommodative stance for people of various different backgrounds, and then provide the case study of Sikkim and Tripura. So that is where you talk about the aspect of the living document, that is the constitution. It is amenable to changes. It is not something which is carved in stone, and that ensures the rights of the pluralistic society. Okay, write the answer on your own and try to basically gain feedback associated with that. Now moving on to the second article, the shifting sands within global supply chains. Now this basically is a follow-up, or this is a write-up owing to some legislation which has been brought in the US Congress, whereby the US Congress has said that they would prohibit the import or sale of vehicle systems, connected vehicle systems, designed, manufactured or supplied by entities with a nexus to China or Russia. Now you see, all of you would have followed the news story where we talked about, or where you had the pager attack, right? Israel carried out a large-scale pager attack. Now, due to that pager attack, you basically had the entire faith in the supply chain mechanism got shaken. that what is this? That if let's suppose you are getting something and that was followed by a walkie-talkie attack, isn't it? So basically, if you are ordering certain things from the market, you never know if that material has been compromised or tampered with. That material can be a snooping device, a spy tool. So that is what has put the world on their toes. And US Congress has basically, there is a legislation which is being introduced in the Congress which talks about the fact that any of the connected vehicle systems manufactured by entities who are linked to China or Russia, we won't import that. Now, this tells you about the change in the principles of supply chain which has been carried out. So when we talk about supply chains, you see, supply chain, what do we mean by the concept of supply chain? That something is produced somewhere, some components are got from or taken from somewhere else, both the materials will be assembled and then provided to the market, supplied to the market. So it is a kind of a chain connecting the supply to the demand. Now there are principles involved in terms of driving the supply chain or followed by supply chain. There are two major principles. One of the principle is, which was followed for decades, that is just in time. What is this principle? This principle talks about, let's suppose you have a particular, let's consider only the case of a car, a vehicle that you are buying. Now you see, a vehicle, if let's suppose you are importing a vehicle, the entire, all the aspects of the vehicle, all the parts of the vehicle need not come from the same country. You might have the chips, the microprocessors coming, let's suppose, from Germany. You might have the design, the wheels, etc. coming from Italy. Right? So they are coming. Let's suppose the fabrication is happening in China. Right? And all of them, let's suppose, are being assembled somewhere, let's suppose India. And final product is delivered. Which means what? All the materials are assembled in different places, brought together, and then they reach the market. That is the just in time. This was followed for a long period of time. Because, why? This ensures a kind of a robustness in the supply chain, that you are not only dependent for a particular part only on one country. You can have various different economies flourishing owing to manufacturing of the product. But you see, at the time of COVID pandemic, when the world was looking at China with a suspicious eye, the world at that point of time realized that as the Chinese economy closed itself from the outside world owing to the suspicions of COVID, now at that point of time, the globe or the world faced a supply chain crisis. And when we say a supply chain crisis, in the sense, components were not available. And certain components, you did not want the components to be taken from China. So that is when you had another aspect, that is just in case, where you basically ensure that you are selective about the region from where you are getting those supply materials. Supply chain resilience was a new terminology which started gaining traction. That you have to be resilient to any shock that the supply chain mechanism might face. Now, this is when countries like Australia, India, Japan, US, all of them, remember, they had banned companies, Chinese telecom companies like Huawei in participating in 5G telecom sector. Because they were scared and they were afraid of the fact that Huawei might install something on the back end and might use the telecom network for spying, surveillance, and worse, in order to damage the infrastructure or the larger population. So this is something that the world has changed its stance. The world has changed from just in time to just in case, where you basically become region selective. Region selective. Region selective in terms of what? In terms of whether to gain or whether to get a particular material from some region or not. Like if I don't want to take material from China, I will not take materials from China. I will take materials from Germany. So that is basically just in case. Now, in the present day and age, you don't have any machine or mostly you don't have any particular system which is made only in one country. You have diverse systems coming from different countries and being assembled together. Now, in that backdrop, given the fact that we know now that pagers, handsets, telephones, cars, everything can be tampered with, we are one of the heavy importers of defense equipments as well. And let's suppose we start manufacturing our own defense equipment. Still, some of the critical components in those defense equipments, like the visors, like the communication devices, some of them are still imported. So what is it that we should do in order to ensure that there is a robustness and some amount of supply chain resilience which we have in our system? So there are certain way forward associated. What are those? First of all, trust but verify. Any imported item, any item that we import, that is basically has to be verified, right? Now you can basically classify the items in terms of sensitive items, critical items, and also in terms of items which are less critical. So less critical items, you trust that, okay, that country is giving me a battery, so there are chances that the battery is safe. Because the battery is being used for industries, fair enough, I don't have that much risk. But still I will verify if it is of a perfect condition, if it is resilient, reliable, and also in the sense that it is not a snooping device. Then you have certain sectors like defense, government services. There you should have zero trust, right? So trust but verify for non-critical equipments, and zero trust in terms of critical equipments. Where what do? Do you stop the import? That is not possible. You will still import, but then you will verify to the last extent. Even if you are importing it from a friendly nation, like let's suppose Russia or US, you will still verify the equipment, that whether they are performing as per normal parameters or whether they have been turned into a destructive device. And monitoring has to be followed. So a careful inspection followed by a deeper monitoring. Then just in case strategy, we have to be region selective from where we are getting the equipments, we are getting the devices. So that is basically the just in case strategy which needs to be followed. So these are the three things which has to be taken as a way forward in order to ensure that we have a resilient supply chain network. Now, practice question. Discuss the strategies required to develop secure supply chain networks. Now, how do you introduce the answer? In the introduction, do you straight away start with that XYZ strategies are needed? No. In the introduction, you address the supply chain networks, the relevance of supply chain networks. So you talk about that these supply chain networks are an important cog in the wheel, not only for meeting the global demands, but also ensuring timely supply of a particular good in the hand of the consumer. This has been the backdrop or the backbone of driving trade and globalization in the past decades, right? Now, once you have written that introduction, then talk about the threats that the supply chain network faces, right? So, in the body, you talk about, start with threats. And you talk about that nowadays the global supply chain networks, they face certain threats like, and then you can use the bubble representation as well, or a kind of a flowchart like way as well. If you want to save space, you basically can use a mechanism like this. Okay, talk about it. Threats like tampering of the equipments, etc. All of that you can talk about. Then after that, you basically start writing that owing to these threats, there is a requirement of devising certain strategies in order to ensure a robust supply chain network. And what can be those strategies? For non-critical equipments, trust but verify. For critical equipment, zero trust policy. And for other overall equipments, just in case strategy has to be followed. Obviously, you will elaborate a bit. Now, eventually in the conclusion, that in the modern era, when you talk about the conclusion, that is relevant, important. So in the modern era, national security is linked with the vitality and the robustness of the supply chain. Ensuring that the supply chain is tamper-proof is the need of the hour in order to ensure that the society, the nation is protected and is ensured. Like that, you can conclude the answer. Okay? Moving on to the third article. Celebration and vigil. This is basically about the two diseases. This talks about two diseases. One is Kala Azar and the other is trachoma. Now, Kala Azar is one of the most significantly impacting disease in terms of the larger population that you have. India has suffered tremendously from this disease, that is Kala Azar. Now, this is spread by a protozoan, that is, you have Leishmania donovani, which is responsible for the spread of Kala Azar. At one point of time, India represented around 11% of the global cases of Kala Azar. However, these diseases are now almost on the verge of elimination. As per WHO standard, when do you say that you have eliminated a particular disease? When you have less than one case per 10,000 of the population. That is basically elimination. Less than one per 1,000. Per 10,000 rather. Okay, so less than 1 per 10,000 population, that is something which is when you consider it eliminated. When you have it for 2 to 3 consecutive years, that is when you submit a memorandum to the WHO, and WHO will then declare India to be Kala Azar free. Now, this is a cause of celebration because when we talk about in India's present situation, so India had registered 595 cases of Kala Azar and 4 deaths in 2023. In 2024, till now, there has only been 1 death. So that tells you that the number of cases, the onset of the cases have reduced. This is owing to certain significant changes and certain measures which have been taken for the last couple of decades, and also ensuring cleanliness overall. Because these are some of the diseases which spread particularly in unhygienic situations. They are carried by vectors, and that is when the disease gets problematic. So trachoma is also one of those. Trachoma is the one which can cause permanent blindness. It spreads from surface to surface contact as well. Now, while you can have these diseases which are eliminated, they are still not eradicated. And here comes the minute or the small difference I want you to be aware about. So pay attention carefully. When do we say that a disease has been eliminated? And when do we say that a disease has been eradicated? Is there a difference at all? Yes, there is. So when you have the situation where, let's suppose you have less than 1 case per 10,000 population, then you say the disease has been eliminated. But when you have no case at all and the disease will never come back, that is when you say it is eradicated. We have to achieve this. We don't have to be happy with eliminated. As of now, both these diseases, they can be thought to be on the verge of being eliminated in India. So you need a continued monitoring and a significantly vigilant population as well, that, or the administration as well, that these diseases do not come back. That is the need of the hour. So basically, you have all of these, both these diseases as neglected tropical disease. So what is that term, neglected tropical disease? Those neglected, first of all, focus on the term neglected, means it is not in the agenda of various different health programs being run by the larger organizations like WHO. It is mostly in the tropical countries associated with poor unhygienic conditions and direct co-linkage with poverty. If you live in the poorer sections of the society, you will be exposed to certain sets of virus or certain sets of infection. So those are your neglected tropical disease. So because you don't have such kind of global attention paid onto that, so medicines for that, vaccines for that, they are not easily developed. So that is why eliminating a neglected tropical disease is a cause for much greater celebration on the part of India, and it tells you that after polio, we have basically managed to gain victory over another set of diseases. But for your prelims, what is relevant? The details of Kala-Azar. So it is a deadly parasitic disease caused by the protozoa parasite Leishmania donovani. Right? Now, it is also visceral leishmaniasis or black fever. This is what is also known as the black fever. Now, three types of leishmaniasis exist: visceral leishmaniasis, then cutaneous leishmaniasis, and mucocutaneous leishmaniasis. What are they? In the case of visceral leishmaniasis, you basically have multiple organs which are impacted, and it can cause death owing to organ failure. Then, basically, when we talk about cutaneous leishmaniasis, which causes skin sores and is the most common form associated. And then you also have mucosal and skin lesions which are caused. That is the case of Kala-Azar. Okay? Now, trachoma. Trachoma basically is a disease with the bacterium Chlamydia trachomatis, which ends up spreading this disease of trachoma. Blindness from trachoma is irreversible. It spreads through personal contact, right? When you touch a surface, you basically spread that virus, spread that bacterium, and that bacterium can then infect the other individual. So basically, let's suppose you have rubbed your eyes and you have some discharge from the eye, and that will contain the bacterium. It is responsible for causing permanent blindness in large section of the population as well. Okay, so that is relevant, both trachoma and Kala-Azar. This is relevant for your prelims as well. Okay, now the neglected tropical disease is something that we have already seen. VN, please mention subject name also. Subject name we have mentioned, isn't it? In the topic slide itself, we have mentioned the subject name. The first topic is relevant for your GS paper 2. That is the subject, or that is the portion associated with polity. The second topic about global supply chain associated with GS paper 3, associated with economy. And the third topic with science and tech, diseases, that is again for GS paper 3. We have mentioned it. In the topic slide, if you observe, we mentioned the subjects there itself. Now, coming to certain articles relevant for your prelims. So, cyber fraud losses could amount to 0.7% of GDP. So, basically, you have various different cyber frauds which are on the rise. Be it basically when we talk about, let's suppose, the mule accounts, when you have fraudulent cash extraction or cash transfers, even from ATMs, you have the card skimmers, etc. They are being used. So there is a substantial amount of loss which is being faced, right? So Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center, that is what is known as I4C. That is something that you have to keep in mind for your prelims exam. So Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center, they have made a projection owing to which, and as per that projection, it is indicating that this much amount of loss can happen. But the problem with this is that this loss is not with that of a particular institution that they will suffer. It is basically the retail individuals, that is you and me, who are suffering. So it will directly end up impacting the disposable income of the population, and that can bring about greater amount of injustice to the larger population per se. Okay, so just be in mind keep in mind what is I4C and what is it responsible for. Okay, now India close to finalizing industry carbon targets ahead of Conference of Parties meet. Now you see, next month you will have the Conference of Parties number 29, which is going to be held in Baku in Azerbaijan. Now this is going to be the Conference of Party. Conference of Party, what is COP? Conference of Party. So, whenever you have any convention, and in this case, United Nations Framework Convention to Climate Change. This was a convention which was arrived at in 1992 at Rio in Brazil, right? In the very famous Earth Summit. Now, under this convention, you will have certain members, the states. For example, India is a member, UAE is a member, like that. You will have China is a member. So these are the member states. So the meeting of the member states, that is what is COP, Conference of the Parties. Conference of the Party is the highest decision-making body for any convention. And that is the highest decision-making body even for UNFCCC. Now, the Conference of Party for UNFCCC meets annually. Last year, it met at Dubai. Year before that, at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Year before that, at Glasgow. So like that, they meet every year. Now, this year they are going to meet in Baku, Azerbaijan. Now, there is a lot of politics already playing around this Conference of Party, and we will do a special YouTube session with regards to the geopolitics driving the Conference of Parties already this time, with US elections being seen as an excuse where the developed nations again seek to escape their responsibility of paying money or financial assistance to the developing world in order to adapt to climate change. So developed nations are already trying to escape. But India, being a responsible member in the Global Committee of Nations, India basically wants to set the benchmark high. As you would be aware that even as per the Paris Agreement to the UNFCCC, India was amongst the only major economies which was on the way not only to achieve its target but overachieve its target. Now what India is trying to do this time is, before going to the Conference of Parties meet, India wants to set industry-wise benchmarks of emission targets. What it will do, it will help India achieve the emission goals, the emission capping, and also ensure that there is a kind of a transparent mechanism where there is accountability for the various different industries in terms of how and when they are carrying out the emission. If they are emitting more, then the carbon market mechanism that India is seeking to develop about the sale and the buying of the carbon credits, that can be facilitated. Okay, so that is something which will be finalized in the next week or so, and after that we'll do a detailed session about the Conference of Parties. By the way, is anybody aware that as we speak there is another Conference of Parties which is going on? Try to find out which Conference of Parties is going on, where is it happening. It is COP number 16, but for which convention? Try to find out and put that in the comment section below. Now, moving on to the last article. India cannot risk another bout of inflation. So basically, the RBI governor has issued the statement owing to the fact that there has been an increased clamor call that please cut down the interest rate so that the growth can be boosted. Now, interest rate and a kind of relationship with growth and money supply is something that we have talked about in detail previously also. But the RBI governor has said that, look, in the present day and age, after the economic cycle is being completed, we cannot as a country afford another inflationary cycle. Something that can be very detrimental to the larger population per se. Presently also we are facing some inflation, but that inflation is largely attributable to the aspects of the global supply chain shocks, the wars, commodity pricing overall, and also that many countries in the world are not developing that much or growing that much. So our export sector is also impacted. So there are some amount of inflationary pressures. There is that huge and heavy amount of rainfall, which has also led to food inflation going through the roof. But then that is something which is very seasonal. It is not a perpetual inflation. But if we were to cut the interest rates as of now, that inflation could have spiraled out of control. So that is why he's advocating that right now we are maintaining a balanced stance of the interest rates, and going ahead in the future we shall be flexible, and when required to push the growth, the RBI can cut the interest rate as well. Okay, so that basically very good. Ritesh Kumar Vishwakarma and Shuvendu Kumar. It is not being held in California. No. It is Conference of Parties number 16 of UNCBD. Very good. Beautiful. So that brings us to the end of the discussion, and as I told you, there has already been there are multiple news stories today about Cyclone Dana, but we have covered that in a separate video. You will find that under the Geographer series and in our YouTube channel about Cyclone Dana. Do visit that and do take a look at the question and try to attempt that question itself. I hope today's session was helpful and you have understood from the constitutional provisions that we have talked about to Kala-Azar, the leishmaniasis and trachoma. You have understood the gist of today's newspaper and which are the important articles to be studied. After this, I suggest you to do visit the Telegram page and do attempt the multiple choice question, and also try writing the answers to the subjective questions that we have discussed about. We meet again tomorrow. Till then, take care, goodbye, and if you have liked the session, please don't forget to click on the like, share and the subscribe button. Thank you.